Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Lewis McGlynn. First up tonight, our Ukraine update on day 490 of the Russian invasion. At least 10 people have been killed after a strike on Tuesday which hit a restaurant in the Kramatorsk in Ukraine's Donetsk region. The dead include at least 3 children and more than 60 people are said to have been wounded. Emergency services have said that 7 people have been rescued from under the rubble. The Ukrainian government appointed Herman Smetana as the new head of state-owned weapons producer Ukroboronprom today. The newly appointed Director General has been tasked with increasing the production of ammunition and military equipment and building an effective anti-corruption infrastructure within the company. Oleg Senyabov, a governor of Kharkiv, reports that 70-year-old woman was injured in the shelling in the Kupiansk district. Ukraine's Air Force has reported that overnight it destroyed 6 Shahed drones. 2 drones were shot down over the Cherkasy region and 2 more hit an empty warehouse within the region, it's been said. Ukrainian Defence Minister Oleksiy Reznikov has said Ukrainian forces have made certain gains that have not been made public and that the bulk of its troops' reserves have yet to be deployed. One of the Russian-imposed leaders in the occupied Zaporizhia region, Vladimir Rogov, has claimed that explosions have been heard in the city of Polohoy. Vyacheslav Gladkov, governor of the Belgorod region in Russia, claimed that over 200 people had their water supply interrupted after a Ukrainian cross-border strike on the region. In Kiev today, Lithuania's president, Gitanas Nausėda, confirmed that his country will supply Ukraine with 2 NASAMS launchers ahead of an EU summit later in the week. Volodymyr Zelensky has thanked the Parliament of Croatia for recognising the Holodomor as a genocide. The New York Times is reporting General Sergei Surovikin, the deputy commander of Russia's military operations in Ukraine, had advanced knowledge that Yevgeny Prigozhin was planning the rebellion against Moscow's defence officials. Jens Stoltenberg has said that NATO is ready to defend itself from Moscow or Minsk, after calls from countries bordering Belarus and Russia for the alliance to strengthen its eastern defences. Polish President Andrzej Duda said that the movement of Wagner Group troops to Belarus is a negative signal for Poland. Wagner forces in Russia are expected to begin the process of disarming after Moscow announced plans for the group to hand over weapons, vehicles and equipment. Elements of the force will be disbanded, absorbed into the Russian military, or head into exile in Belarus along with Prigozhin, under the agreement hammered out between the mercenary leader and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our top story tonight. On the second day of diplomatic engagements in Brussels, First Minister Humza Yousaf met Ireland's ambassador to the EU, Tom Hannay, and New Zealand ambassador Carl Riach. They discussed shared interest in trade, culture and energy. The First Minister also met with the EU Commission Vice President for International Relations, Maros Šefčovič. They discussed Scotland's enduring ties with our European neighbours based on shared values such as democracy, equality and respect for human rights. The First Minister said that he had productive discussions on renewable energy, wellbeing economy, Horizon Association, Ukraine and many other issues. Mr Yousaf said that Scotland views itself proudly as a European nation and will seek to deepen our friendship with the EU. Maros Šefčovič has said that he was pleased to discuss with the First Minister of Scotland how the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement can benefit Scotland. The EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement is the framework for cooperation in a wide range of areas, from trade to participation in EU programmes. For the meeting with Maros Šefčovič, the UK Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, had insisted that a UK government diplomat be present to monitor the talks, in a move which has been described as petty by Dundee West MP Chris Law. As the First Minister concluded his visit to Brussels, his first international trip in post, he thanked staff at Scotland House Brussels for all they do to represent Scottish interests in Europe and promote Scotland's expertise across a diverse range of policy areas. During his visit, the First Minister met with Jan Jambon, Minister-President of Flanders, and signed a Memorandum of Understanding between the Government of Flanders and the Scottish Government, with a view to further strengthening and developing their mutual relations, building on their common cultural heritage and historical links. Children across the UK are suffering worsening levels of tooth decay, anxiety, and stunted growth as the cost of food continues to soar, a survey of school nurses has found. The scale and severity of health issues facing pupils has worsened in the past year as food prices soared to their highest level in 45 years, according to research. Nurses reported children squirreling away school meals to take home to their parents, while a growing number were taken to A&E after fainting due to hunger. A pupil who had been excluded was recently reported to the police by his school for climbing over a barbed wire fence to take home the slops from food waste bins. I'm not over-dramatising at all when I say we've got starving, hungry, sad, worried children committing crimes so their families can eat, said Sharon White, the chief executive of the School and Public Health Nurses Association. This could have lifelong, far-reaching consequences. It's horrendous and it's gut-wrenching. The survey of 313 school nurses and dentists found that 2/3 said the health issues facing children had worsened in the past year, with parents in work struggling to afford nutritious meals. Almost half said they dealt with children suffering due to a lack of healthy food on a daily or weekly basis. The most common health issues were decaying and damaged teeth, seen by nearly 4 in 5 children's nurses and dentists, as well as worsening mental health problems, stunted growth, and behavioural changes, such as anxiety and increased irritability. The study was carried out by SAFNA and the British Dental Association as part of the No Child Left Behind campaign, urging the government to commit to free school meals for every primary school pupil in England. The governments of Scotland and Wales have started rolling out universal free school meals to primary school pupils, while London will follow suit from September. All children in maintained schools in England are entitled to free school meals up to the end of Year 2, after which it only applies to households on certain benefits. The study findings come amid growing pressure on Labour to introduce universal free school meals for primary-aged children in England if the party wins the next general election. However, Sir Keir Starmer has refused to commit to widening access to free school meals as he seeks to reduce public spending. The UK government's plans to hit net zero have been comprehensively criticised in a withering report by its own advisers that says targets are being missed on nearly every front. Fewer homes were insulated last year under the government-backed scheme than the year before, despite soaring energy bills and a cost of living crisis. There is little progress on transport emissions, no coherent programme for behaviour change, and still no decision on hydrogen for home heating. Greenhouse gas emissions have been falling by just under 3% a year, but this will need to double over the next 8 years. Public charging for electric vehicles is more costly than it need be, and the government is expecting transport emissions to be higher than was previously admitted, according to the CCC's latest annual report, published today, entitled Progress in Reducing UK Emissions, 2023 Report to Parliament. The Climate Change Committee said that the installation of new wind and solar farms and the upgrading of the electricity grid are still too slow to meet net zero, and the lack of urgency and failure of political leadership by the UK government means progress has stalled. Lord Debon, the outgoing chair of the CCC, said the UK had lost the leadership on climate action shown at COP26 in 2021, and done a number of things, such as greenlighting a new coal mine and new oil and gas fields in the North Sea, that were utterly unacceptable. The report also found the number of homes receiving energy efficiency improvements under the government's Energy Company Obligation Scheme more than halved, from 383,700 in 2021 to 159,600 in 2022. According to the report, at least 1 million to 2 million homes should be upgraded each year to meet net zero. Homes are still being built that will need to be retrofitted with low-carbon heating and efficiency measures, because the government has not yet brought in its promised future home standard. No decision on whether to use hydrogen for home heating will be made until 2026, leaving households and boilers companies in limbo. Emissions from transport have remained stubbornly high as the government has made a political choice to allow an increase in road traffic instead of encouraging people onto public transport. There is no coherent programme to encourage people to change their high-carbon lifestyles, and there is no clear policy to decarbonise steel production or emissions from other heavy industry. Chris Stark, the chief executive of the CCC, said, "What's missing is the kind of political leadership." The 438-page annual progress report was the committee's 15th since the 2008 Climate Change Act, and the last for Debon, a former Conservative Environment Secretary, who is stepping down after an extended 10-year term as chair. An interim chair, the scientist Professor Piers Forster of Leeds, will take over while a replacement is found. The Labour Party has dropped its pledge to introduce rent controls despite soaring housing costs, in the latest in a long line of U-turns in which the Sir Keir Starmer has changed position to back Brexit and break its pledges on rent controls, tuition fees, free school meals, public sector pay and freedom of movement. This latest U-turn announcement has been followed by reports that Sir Keir is considering scrapping his promise to restore the Department for International Development, despite a backlash from anti-poverty campaigners. The SNP said that Keir Starmer's flip-flopping as the pro-Brexit Labour Party is hard to distinguish from the Tories. Commenting, SNP Westminster Deputy Leader Mary Black MP said, "Under flip-flopping Keir Starmer, the pro-Brexit Labour Party is hard to distinguish from the Tories and has done so many U-turns it'll have no policies left by the election. The SNP is the only party offering real change with independence, real support with the cost of living, and real opposition to Tory cuts. In contrast, the Tory-light Labour Party only offers Brexit, austerity cuts, and the same damaging policies that got the UK into this mess. While Keir Starmer has thrown every progressive policy on the scrap heap, the SNP government is showing how it's done by delivering rent controls, free school meals, free tuition, free personal care, and the Scottish Child Payment, higher public sector pay, key services in public hands, and progressive taxation." A new report detailing intelligence failures leading up to the January 6th attack on the US Capitol said government agencies responsible for anticipating trouble downplayed the threat even as the building was being stormed in an attempt to stop certification of Joe Biden's election victory. The 105-page report, issued by Democrats on the Senate Homeland Security Committee, said intelligence personnel at the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and other agencies ignored warnings of violence in December 2020. Such officials then blamed each other for failing to prevent the attack that ensued, which left more than 140 police officers injured and led to several deaths. The US government has won hundreds of convictions against the rioters, with some getting long prison sentences. These agencies failed to sound the alarm and share critical intelligence information that could have helped law enforcement better prepare for the events of January 6th, said Gary Peters of Michigan, the Democratic chair of the committee issuing the report, titled Planned in Plain Sight, a review of the intelligence failures in advance of 6th of January 2021. Republicans on the committee did not comment. Last summer, a House of Representatives Select Committee held hearings following a long investigation that concluded that the then President, Donald Trump, repeatedly ignored top aides' findings that there was no significant fraud in the 2020 presidential election, which he lost. Trump continues to falsely insist he won that contest and that he was the victim of election fraud. Hours before the riot, Trump delivered a fiery speech to his supporters, urging them to march to the Capitol as the House and Senate met to certify Biden's win. The Senate committee found that in December 2020, the FBI received information that the far-right Proud Boys extremist group planned to be in Washington to literally kill people. On the 3rd to the 4th of January 2021, the report says intelligence agencies knew of multiple postings on social media calling for armed violence and storming the capital. Yet, as late as 8:57 a.m. on January 6th, a senior watch officer at the DHS National Operations Centre wrote, "There is no indication of civil disobedience." By 2:58 p.m, the report noted, with a riot declared and the capital in formal lockdown, the DHS Office of Intelligence and Analysis noted online chatter calling for more violence, but said, "At this time, no credible information to pass on has been established." The report concluded there was a clear need for a re-evaluation of the federal government's domestic intelligence, collection, analysis and dissemination processes. A fare freeze on the Clyde and Hebrides and Northern Isles ferry networks has been extended for a further 6 months. Ticket prices will be held at current levels from October 2023 until the end of March 2024 to help people and businesses from Scotland's remote, rural and island communities. A review of future fares will also take place to ensure that services remain sustainable, affordable and fair, with feedback from island communities being a key factor in deciding the future shape and priorities. The fare freeze will allow operators to release their timetables from October onwards. Transport Minister Fiona Hislop said, "The decision to extend the fares freeze on our ferry networks will help support the island communities that depend on these vital services." The Scottish Government is acutely aware of the current challenges being faced by these communities, particularly with disruption to services on the Clyde and Hebrides network, although the situation will improve as new tonnage starts to join the fleet from next year. The ongoing cost of living impacts are also arguably more challenging for our islands than any other part of the country, so I hope this fares freeze will continue to help residents and businesses from that perspective. A new national model of public funding for all colleges and universities, as well as apprenticeships and training, will be developed as part of the widespread reforms across the education and skills sector. The Scottish Government will also take over responsibility for skills planning, with the new national qualifications body overseeing all publicly funded post-school qualifications except degrees. The changes are set out in a new blueprint for the future of post-school education, research and skills, which published today. It accepts a number of the recommendations in the recent Withers Review, which called for major change in the skills delivery system to improve outcomes for learners and employers, as well as for other reports on educational reform. Higher and Further Education Minister Graham Day said, "Over 500,000 people are participating in our education, research and skills system every year, underpinned by over £3 billion worth of investment. We need to ensure it is fit for the future, and that's why we are embarking on a widespread programme of reform across the sector. Globalisation, technological advances, the impact of the pandemic, and demographic changes all point towards the need for change, as well as the shifting expectations of students and of employers. A key part of this is ensuring all elements of the lifelong education and skills sector work together as one single system. The recent review of skills delivery by James Withers set out a clear case for change, starting with these key actions for government, which I believe will help to deliver the improvement required." A new 6-year national litter and fly tipping strategy sets out how national and local government, businesses, third sector, communities and individuals can work together to drive behaviour change, improve infrastructure and strengthen enforcement. Also published is an action plan detailing specific actions and interventions to be progressed by the Scottish Government and its partners and agencies in the first year. Key measures include fines for fly tipping to be more than doubled to £500, introduction of new powers to impose a fine on the registered keeper of a vehicle from which a littering offence is committed, a new national online litter hub to provide information, advice and support to community groups and other relevant local organisations on tackling litter and littering behaviour, dedicated support for private landowners including funding for trials to help deter and deal with fly tipping affecting their land. Increased action to detect and disrupt fly tippers, especially unregistered waste carriers, advertising online, such as proactive engagement with online platforms and dedicated SEPA activity to tackle rogue operators. Minister for Green Skills, Circular Economy and Biodiversity, Lorna Slater, has said, "Scotland is a beautiful country and we all have a responsibility to keep it that way. This government makes no apologies for taking bold action on tackling litter and fly tipping, which is a blight on our streets, communities and countryside, as well as our natural environment and wildlife. This strategy will drive further change in behaviours and the delivery of services. Enforcement is a key theme, and the strategy sets out robust commitments, including raising fixed penalty notices for fly tipping to £500 and considering increasing fines further if required. The strategy has been developed in partnership with Zero Waste Scotland, Keep Scotland Beautiful, and Scottish Environment Protection Agency, following engagement with other key partners and stakeholders, including local authorities and landowners, and has been informed by responses to consultations. In Glasgow today, Scottish Government Minister for Culture, Europe and International Development, Christina McKelvey, launched Our Past, Our Future, a new strategy for Scotland's historic environment sector. Led by Historic Environment Scotland, Our Past, Our Future was created following a public consultation in collaboration with 10 organisations representing Scotland's heritage sector, including the Scottish Government, to create a new national strategy for those working in the public sector and beyond. This new strategy, which builds on the previous strategy, Our Place in Time, is intended to provide a roadmap for the next 5 years and highlights the sector's shared ambition to make a responsible contribution to Scotland's economy and use the historic environment to improve people's well-being. It also has a strong focus on the transition to net zero, alongside a forward-looking ambition to empower communities and build a well-being economy. Scotland's historic environment plays a key role in the country's economy, sustaining 68,000 full-time equivalent jobs and generating £4.4 billion per year pre-COVID pandemic. These numbers are expected to increase by an estimated 10,000 new jobs over the next decade to maintain and adapt Scotland's traditional building stock. The strategy also sets out the goal of further retrofitting and putting Scotland's traditional buildings back into use. Estimates put these buildings at representing 19% of Scotland's housing stock, 33% of retail space, and almost 50% of spaces used by the public sector. Today's launch event was held in Citation in Glasgow, a B-listed former courthouse built in 1844, which is now in reuse. Culture Minister Christina McKelvey said, "I am pleased that this refreshed strategy has been designed in partnership between the historic environment and the cross-cutting sectors to face the fresh challenges around how we care for our historic environment. Our Past, Our Future identifies opportunities for change by working collaboratively to sustain and enhance our historic environment and built heritage." The key priorities identified in this national strategy also align with the Scottish Government's goal of creating a more empowered, resilient and inclusive communities, as we work towards a well-being economy delivering net zero by 2045. Well, that's it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So, to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view, however, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. Good night, and thank you for watching.